Hello there. Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, aka Twitch, aka TikTok. I'm everywhere. I am in all places. Welcome back. My name is Kris, this is Wizard Way, and today is Silmarillion Saturday, where I read and review the Silmarillion so you don't have to, and point out various connections between the Silm and the upcoming Lord of the Rings TV show, The Rings of Power, on Amazon Prime. So, today's going to be a relatively short stream. I actually completely forgot that I was going to be streaming today, because I am planning on being on Don Marshall 72's Tipsy Tolkien today. So, I've got my adult fruit punch waiting to enjoy. So after I finish this stream, I think we're only going to cover chapter 22 today. It's a relatively short chapter, but that gives me a little extra time to prep and prime for the recording session I will be doing with Dawn. Wish me luck. I had to actually go out and purchase alcohol because I don't typically drink. So this will be interesting. This will be fun. But that is an extra perk for people who join Dawn's Patreon. So, highly recommend. Shameless plug for Dawn's Patreon, but go to patreon.com and just plug in Dawn Marshall and he should pop right up. Highly recommend. Dawn is fantastic, and I am looking forward to getting tipsy and talking Tolkien lore with him. So, I have no idea where that conversation is going to go, but hopefully it will be really entertaining for everyone who is on Dawn's Patreon. I'm not the only one. Dawn apparently is batch recording Tipsy Tolkien, so he doesn't have to get tipsy too terribly often. I think I'm his third or fourth recording today. So as we speak, he is probably recording with other Tolkien friends, and by the time he gets to me, he's gonna be sloshed. Which means I need to prime before we go. Or I guess I'm gonna be the more sober of the two of us, which could also be fun. It means I get to steer the conversation. In any event, it's gonna be a lot of fun. So I guarantee it's gonna be fun because Dawn will have already been drinking for a couple hours at that point. So think late live stream chaos for Dawn. That's gonna be from the get-go with our recording. So I hope everyone enjoys that. Found out not everyone knows that Daddy's also in Twilight. Lee Pace is everywhere. Lee Pace is in the multiverse, the Marvel universe as well. Because he was the bad guy in Guardians of the Galaxy, if I remember correctly. That was Lee Pace too. So, Granddaddy's everywhere. And yeah, that's my t-shirt. Available on my website, elfboy.com. If you want to support me, you can join my Patreon to get discounts on merch. Again, shameless self-promotion. Yeah, Lee Pace is Ronan. I don't remember any of the names when it comes to Marvel stuff. It's not my fandom. I think I've seen most of the movies, but Elrond as Red Skull. Oh, really? I didn't know that Hugo Weaving was in there too. Whichever movie Red Skull is part of, I don't recall if I've seen it or not. It's been a while. But thank you. So, welcome back. It is, again, Silmarillion Saturday. We're going to be reading chapter 22. So let's open on up. Chapter 22 is Of the Ruin of Doriath. So, we're getting very close to the end of the book. There are only 3 chapters left. So, let's see. Yeah, I think we can make it through chapter 22 today. Following chapter 22, we have Of Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin. And then chapter 24 is Of the Voyage of Earendil and the War of Wrath. And that's the final chapter of the Quintus Silmarillion. So we only have 3 chapters left, and we'll get through one of them today. Might plan for an extra long stream next weekend, since I won't be recording, a different live with somebody else. But today, we will certainly get through chapter 22. I'm just gonna look really quickly. Yeah, we will be using voice effects today, so if you're over on my TikTok, please take a moment to head to the link in my bio over to my YouTube channel. You will be able to see all of the pretty illustrations from the book, as well as hear my voice effects. I have voice effect filters that I put on for various characters. I think we're going to get some eagles in the mix today, so we'll have fun with that. But that's the perk of being over on my YouTube channel instead of staying on TikTok. You get a fuller experience of me reading. And I need the watch minutes over on YouTube, so if you really want to support me, YouTube please. Subscribing is free. And then you get notifications if you turn them on. In. Yes. Score. Alright. I don't want to linger too long because I do need to prepare for my other recording for today, so... let's make sure things are where they need to be. I did position the cat bed here just in case my cats decide to show up. You might get some kitty in the corner there. Yay! I love my kitties. They haven't been too pushy today, though, so we'll see if they even show up. If they will deign to share their presence with us. Alright. So, let us begin. Chapter 22, Of the Ruin of Doriath. So ended the tale of Turin Turambar, but Morgoth did not sleep nor rest from evil, and his dealings with the house of Hador were not yet ended. Against them his malice was unsated, though Hurin was under his eye, and Morwen wandered distraught in the wild. Unhappy was the lot of Hurin. For all that Morgoth knew of the working of his malice, Hurin knew also, but lies were mingled with the truth, and aught that was good was hidden or distorted. In all ways Morgoth sought most to cast an evil light on those things that Thingol and Melian had done, for he hated them, and feared them. When, therefore, he judged the time to be ripe, he released Hurin from his bondage, bidding him go where he would. And he feigned that in this he was moved by pity, as for an enemy utterly defeated. But he lied, for his purpose was that Hurin should still further his hatred for elves and men ere he died. Just as a quick reminder, Hurin is the father of Turin Turambar. If you missed Turin's story, that was the last 2 live streams. It's a very long, involved tale. But his father was chained at the top of one of the mountains of Thangorudrim, which is part of Angband, Morgoth's stronghold in the first stage. He chains him to a chair at the top of the mountain and gives him Morgoth's sight, so the ability to see what is happening in Middle-earth, as if through Morgoth's eyes. So, of course there is treachery involved in that. He's not going to just let Hurin see the true dealings of elves and men the entire time. He's going to paint the worst possible picture, so that he can hopefully sow hatred between men and elves. That's been Morgoth's goal for a while now. He really wants these 2 children of Iluvatar to be at each other's throats, because if they don't present a united front, he will be able to defeat them without too much trouble. They really do need to band together if they are going to defeat Morgoth in any way, shape, or form. So he's trying to prevent that from happening. So he pretends that he's been moved with pity to release Hurin from his bondage, but it's all a ploy. It always is. Then, little though he trusted the words of Morgoth, knowing indeed that he was without pity, Hurin took his freedom and went forth in grief, embittered by the words of the Dark Lord. And a year was now gone since the death of Turin, his son. For 28 years he had been held captive in Angband, and he was grown grim to look upon. His hair and beard were white and long, but he walked unbowed, bearing a great black staff, and he was girt with a sword. Thus he passed into Heathlum, and tidings came to the chieftains of the Easterlings that there was a great riding of captains and black soldiers of Angband over the sands of Anfauglith, and with them came an old man, as one that was held in high honor. Therefore they did not lay hands on Hurin, but let him walk at will in those lands, in which they were wise, for the remnant of his own people shunned him, because of his coming from Angband as one in league and honor with Morgoth. Thus his freedom did but increase the bitterness of Hurin's heart. And he departed from the land of Heathlum, and went up into the mountains. Thence he descried far off amid the clouds the peaks of the Chrysaegrim, and he remembered Turgon, and he desired to come again to the hidden realm of Gondolin. He went down, therefore, from Eredwethrin, and he knew not that the creatures of Morgoth watched all his steps, and crossing over and crossing over the Brithiach, I always stumble over that word, the Brithiach, he passed into Dimbar, and came to the dark feet of the Ehoriath. I will show a map in a moment. All the land was cold and desolate, and he looked about him with little hope, standing at the foot of a great fall of stones beneath a sheer rock wall. And he knew not that this was all that was now left to see of the old way of escape. The dry river was blocked, and the arched gate was buried. Then Hurin looked up to the great sky, thinking that he might once more descry the eagles, as he had done long ago in his youth. But he saw only the shadows blown from the east, and clouds swirling about the inaccessible peaks, and he heard only the wind hissing over the stones. But the watch of the great eagles was now redoubled, and they marked Hurin well far below, forlorn in the fading light. And straightway Thorondor himself, since the tidings seemed great, brought word to Turgon. But Turgon said,
"Does Morgoth sleep? You were mistaken."
"Not so,"
said Thorondor.
"If the eagles of Manwë were wont to err thus, then long ago, Lord, your hiding would have been in vain."
"Then your words bode ill,"
said Turgon.
"for they can bear but one meaning. Even Hurin Thalion has surrendered to the will of Morgoth. My heart is shut."
But when Thorondor was gone, Turgon sat long in thought, and he was troubled, remembering the deeds of Hurin of Dorlomin. And he opened his heart, and sent to the eagles to seek for Hurin, and to bring him, if they might, to Gondolin. But it was too late, and they never saw him again in light or in shadow. For Hurin stood in despair before the silent cliffs of the Ehoriath, and the westering sun, piercing the clouds, stained his white hair with red. Then he cried aloud in the wilderness, heedless of any ears, and he cursed the pitiless land. And standing at last upon a high rock, he looked towards Gondolin, and called in a great voice,
"Turgon, Turgon, remember the fen of Serech. O Turgon, will you not hear in your hidden halls?
But there was no sound save the wind in the dry grasses.
Even so they hissed in Serech at the sunset.
Oops. He said, and as he spoke, the sun went behind the mountains of shadow, and a darkness fell about him, and the wind ceased, and there was silence in the waste. Yet there were ears that heard the words of Hurin that Hurin spoke, and report of all came soon to the dark throne in the north, and Morgoth smiled, for he knew now clearly in what region Turgon dwelt, though because of the eagles no spy of his could yet come within sight of the land behind the encircling mountains. This was the first evil that the freedom of Hurin achieved. As darkness fell, Hurin stumbled from the rock and fell into a heavy sleep of grief. But in his sleep he heard the voice of Morwen lamenting, and often she spoke his name. And it seemed to him that her voice came out of Brethiel. Therefore, when he awoke with the coming of day, he arose and went back to the Brithiach. And passing along the eaves of Brethiel, he came at a time of night to the crossings of Tegwin. The night sentinels saw him, but they were filled with dread, for they thought that they saw a ghost out of some ancient battle mound that walked with darkness about it. And therefore Hurin was not stayed, and he came at last to the place of the burning of Glaurung, and saw the tall stone standing near the brink of Cabed Nairmarth. But Hurin did not look at the stone, for he knew what was written there, and his eyes had seen that he was not alone. Sitting in the shadow of the stone there was a woman, bent over her knees, and as Hurin stood there silent, she cast back her tattered hood and lifted her face. Gray she was, and old, but suddenly her eyes looked into his, and he knew her. For though they were wild and full of fear, that light still gleamed in them that long ago had earned her the name Elethwen, proudest and most beautiful of mortal women in the days of old.
"You come at last,"
she said.
"I have waited too long."
It was a dark road, and I have come as I could,
he answered.
"But you are too late,"
said Morwen.
"They are lost."
I know it,
he said.
But you are not.
But Morwen said,
"Almost. I am spent. I shall go with the sun. Now little time is left. If you know, tell me, how did she find him?"
But Hurin did not answer, and they sat beside the stone and did not speak again. And when the sun went down, Morwen sighed and clasped his hand and was still. And Hurin knew that she had died. He looked down at her in the twilight, and it seemed to him that the lines of grief and cruel hardship were smoothed away.
She was not conquered,
he said, and he closed her eyes and sat unmoving beside her as the night drew down. The waters of Cabed Nairamarth roared on, but he heard no sound, and he saw nothing, and felt nothing, for his heart was stone within him. But there came a chill wind that drove sharp rain into his face, and he was roused, and anger rose in him like smoke, mastering reason, so that all his desire was to seek vengeance for his wrongs and for the wrongs of his kin, accusing in his anguish all those who had ever had dealings with them. Then he rose up, and he made a grave for Morwen above Cabed Nairamarth, on the west side of the stone, and upon it he cut these words: Here lies also Morwen Eledwen. It is told that a seer and harp player of Brethiel, named Glirhuin, made a song saying that the stone of the hapless should not be defiled by Morgoth, nor ever thrown down, not though the sea should drown all the land, as after indeed befell, and still Tol Morwen stands alone in the water beyond the new coasts that were made in the days of the wrath of the Valar. But Hurin does not lie there, for his doom drove him on, and the shadow still followed him. And I will pause for a moment so that we can switch the camera, and I will show you one of the illustrations. I love these things. They're so pretty. There it is. Okay. Ooh, yoink. We can zoom that in. There we go. Alright, so here is one of the illustrations by Ted Nasmith. If you are on TikTok, please head over to my YouTube channel. You'll be able to see the illustrations because I have an overhead camera. Beautiful illustrations in this book. This is the 2021 illustrated deluxe edition of the Silmarillion. So it's a really nice version of the book. All illustrations are by Ted Nasmith, and this particular edition has several that haven't been released prior to this edition, so yay artwork. So here is Hurin and Morwen. Sad, sad times. Okay. I don't know why my... There we go. Sorry guys, my computer decided to click away from something, and I'm like, why? There we go. So this is the mound where Turin was buried. So Hurin and Morwen are his parents. It is a sad time. And this is yet again another illustration, not physical illustration, but written illustration of how mortal men can relinquish their lives. This is something that the houses of the Edain, which are the three houses that were like more learned, loyal to the elves, etc. They were sort of elevated amongst their fellow men. So these three houses of men, especially as we go through the Númenórean lines, they have the ability to choose when they die. So in this case, they just sort of relinquish their hold on life. This is part of the concept that we see a couple different times, where Tolkien has spirits and bodies as two separate things. They are interconnected, of course, but the Fea is the spirit and the Hroa is the body. And so both elves and men can relinquish the hold of their Hroa, so they can let their bodies go. And in the case of mortal men, it means they go to Mandos very quickly before passing on to whatever their ultimate fate is, which is never fully known. Versus the elves, if they relinquish their Hroa, much like Luthien Tenuviel did when she chose to die with Beren, they go to the halls of Mandos and eventually are reincarnated, basically. But Morwen lies down and she just relinquishes her hold on mortality. She relinquishes her hold on life and dies on purpose, which is sad, but this does happen frequently with the houses of the Edain, so it's kind of an interesting thing to note. Alright, back to the normal screen, I think. Okay. Let the bodies hit the floor! Yeah, basically. That is basically what they can do. Let the bodies hit the floor. Yes, reminder, please head over to my YouTube channel. That's where I need the minutes watched so that I can actually monetize again. I lost my AdSense because I ignored my YouTube for too long. So we're trying to get it back. Oh gosh. I'm not gonna do that to my voice. My best squawk for the eagles. Yeah, no. I wish I had that skill. I cannot. I cannot. I don't know if you guys recall Sailor J. Whenever I say, "It was a sad day," I'm actually referencing Sailor J. She was the one who did the makeup tutorial about contouring. But it's comedy. It's like stand-up. If the men find out we can shapeshift, they're going to tell the church. And she's like, eliminate the nose. You want to look like you're a pterodactyl. Men love pterodactyls. And she does this pterodactyl screech, and it's like, it's spot on. Major respect to Sailor J. I cannot make that sound come out of my mouth. Alright, let us continue, shall we? Moving on from pterodactyls. Oh, I did want to show you guys the map too. Let's do that as well really quickly. Sorry, jumping back and forth. It's important. It's important to get your bearings because there are a lot of place names in the Somme. Okay, so here's our map of Valerian once again. So up north past the Enfauglith is where Angband is, so that's where Thangorodrim would be. So Hurin, when he is freed, because he doesn't actually escape, but when he is freed, he goes over into Hithlum. And after finding that, they aren't going to welcome him there, he passes over the Eredwethrin and then down here toward the Chrysaegrim. Let me zoom in a bit. So, coming down through here, he ends up in Dimbar and along the Chrysaegrim, which is typically where the river goes, through and under and into Gondolin. Now that pass has now been closed, so he doesn't know how he could get back to Gondolin. He thinks to do so, and he, cries out, curse you all. Turgon, remember the fens of Serech, which are up here, which is where they did battle together. But the eagles don't take him back to Gondolin, and so he wanders off into Brethiel. Brethiel being the forest down here near Doriath. So eventually he finds the mound. Yeah, it mentioned the crossings of Tegnin, so that's here. Eventually he finds the mound where Turin was buried, and that's where he finds Morwen. So it does mention that mound that is raised where Morwen and Turin both fell, that is one of the few places that does not sink into the ocean at the end of the first stage. That's important to note because that's where sort of the theory that one of the posters for the Rings of Power TV show has a black broken sword, and that sword might be Turin Sword Anglahel. Anglahel, aka Gurtham, which is a dark sword made by Eol, the dark elf, from a fallen meteorite. So it is a very unique sword. It actually speaks to Turin. It is a talking sword. It's a pretty badass sword, but it's kind of cursed. It's not a good sword to have. It led to a lot of hardship for Turin, and it was laid with him on the mound. And this mound does not sink into the ocean at the end of the first age. That being significant because it means that technically that sword could be recovered. It's never mentioned again. It's not mentioned in the Legendarium after that point. But as a creative plot point, in Rings of Power, Sauron could go and fetch this sword and use it somehow. Or the men of Numenor, knowing the past of Turin, could find this mound and grab the sword, the remnants of the sword. Could it be reforged? I don't know. Does anyone have the skill to reforge it, seeing as it was made of meteorite and Eol is long since dead? Question mark. But it could play into the TV show, so I wanted to at least mention that and show you guys where things are on the map. So let us continue. Alright. It's so satisfying seeing how far we've come in the book. That's like 2/3? We're about 2/3 through? That's exciting. Alrighty. Memory unlocked. Oh, it's one of the first TikTok sounds that you ever laughed to. That's funny. Yeah, Sailor J is epic. Even I duetted using, or not duetted, used that sound. I used one of those sounds from her spiel. Just as a fun thing when I was first getting into TikTok. I think it's been deleted. I know, yes, the Thran Daddy t-shirt. Available on my website, elfboy.com. Link in bio. Shameless self-promotion. Buy my merch. And this does say Thran Daddy in Elvish at the bottom. In the Tengwar. Which I could get in trouble for, so don't tell the Tolkien estate. If they come after me, I'll take the merch down. I'll take the Elvish off, and you can have Thran Daddy without the Elvish. I like the extra Elvish touch. Alright, continuing with the story. So, Húrin decides not to die with Morwen, and the shadow is continuing to drive him. Now Húrin crossed over Teglin and passed southwards down the ancient road that led to Nargothrond, and he saw far off to the eastward the lonely height of Amon Rúth. And he knew what had befallen there. At length he came to the banks of Narog, and ventured the passage of the wild river upon the fallen stones of the bridge, as Mablung of Doriath had ventured it before him. And he stood before the broken doors of Felagund, leaning on his staff. Sorry, itchy nose. Here it must be told that after the departure of Glaurung, Mim, the petty dwarf, had found his way to Nargothrond, and crept within the ruined halls, and he took possession of them, and sat there fingering the gold and the gems, letting them run ever through his hands, for none came nigh to despoil him, from dread of the spirit of Glaurung and his very memory. But now one had come and stood upon the threshold, and Mim came forth and demanded to know his purpose. But Húrin said,
"Who are you? that would hinder me from entering the house of Finrod Felagund?
Then the dwarf answered,
I am Mim, and before the proud ones came from over the sea, dwarves delved the halls of Nulukizid. Damn dwarvish. Nulukizdin. Dwarves delved the halls of Nulukizdin. I have but returned to take what is mine, for I am the last of my people. Then you shall enjoy your inheritance no longer,
said Hurin.
For I am Hurin, son of Galdor, returned out of Angband, and my son was Turin Turambar, whom you have not forgotten. And he it was that slew Glaurung the dragon, who wasted these halls where now you sit. And not unknown is it to me by whom the dragon helm of Dorlomin was betrayed.
Then Mim was in great fear. Then Mim in great fear besought Hurin to take what he would, but to spare his life. But Hurin gave no heed to his prayer, and slew him there before the doors of Nargothrond. Then he entered in, and stayed a while in that dreadful place, where the treasures of Valinor lay strewn upon the floors in darkness and decay. But it is told that when Hurin came forth from the wreck of Nargothrond, and stood again beneath the sky, he bore with him, out of all that great hoard, but one thing only. Now Hurin journeyed eastward, and he came to the mares of twilight above the falls of Sirion, and there he was taken by the elves that guarded the western marches of Doriath, and brought before King Thingol in the 1,000 caves. Then Thingol was filled with wonder and grief when he looked upon him, and he knew that grim and aged man for Hurin Thalion, the captive of Morgoth. But he greeted him fairly and showed him honor. Hurin made no answer to the king, but drew forth from beneath his cloak the one thing which he had taken with him out of Nargothrond. And that was no lesser treasure than the Nauglamir, the necklace of the dwarves, that was made for Finrod Felagund long years before by the craftsmen of Nogrod and Belagost, most famed of all their works in the elder days, and prized by Finrod, while he lived above all the treasures of Nargothrond. And Hurin cast it at the feet of Thingol with wild and bitter words.
Receive thou thy fee,
he said. Oh, he cried. My bad.
For thy fair keeping of my children and my wife. For this is the Nauglamir, whose name is known to many among elves and men, and I bring it to thee out of the darkness of Nargothrond, where Finrod, thy kinsman, left it behind him when he set forth with Beren, son of Barahir, to fulfill the errand of Thingol of Doriath.
Then Thingol looked upon the great treasure, and he knew it for the Nauglamir, and well did he understand Hurin's intent. But being filled with pity, he restrained his wrath, and endured Hurin's scorn. And at the last Melian spoke and said,
Hurin Thalion, Morgoth hath bewitched thee. For he that seeth through Morgoth's eyes, willing or unwilling, seeth all things crooked. Long was Turin thy son fostered in the halls of Menegroth, and shown love and honor as the son of the king. And it was not by the king's will, nor by mine, that he came never back to Doriath. And afterwards thy wife and thy daughter were harbored here with honor and goodwill. And we sought by all means that we might to dissuade Morwen from the road to Nargothrond. With the voice of Morgoth dost thou now upbraid thy friends.
And hearing the words of Melian, Hurin stood moveless, and he gazed long into the eyes of the queen. And there in Menegroth, defended still by the girdle of Melian from the darkness of the enemy, he read the truth of all that was done, and tasted at last the fullness of woe that was measured for him by Morgoth Bauglir. And he spoke no more of what was past, but stooping, lifted up the Nauglamir from where it lay before Thingol's chair. And he gave it to him, saying,
Receive now, Lord, the necklace of the dwarves, as a gift from one who has nothing, and as a memorial of Hurin of Dorlomin. For now my fate is fulfilled, and the purpose of Morgoth achieved, but I am his thrall no longer.
Then he turned away, and passed out from the 1,000 caves, and all that saw him fell back before his face, and none sought to withstand his going, nor did any know whither he went. But it is said that Hurin would not live thereafter, being bereft of all purpose and desire, and cast himself at last into the western sea, and so ended the mightiest of the warriors of mortal men. So you'll remember earlier it mentioned that that Hurin's return did a few different evil things, unwittingly. One of them actually being this final act of bringing the Nauglamir back to King Thingol. And we're about to get into that. We're about to get into why that's not such a good thing. You've read the Silmarillion 3 times? Nice. This is actually my second reading cover to cover, which is astounding considering how much knowledge I have on the Sil. I only read it cover to cover the first time, and I've just referenced bits and pieces of it like so many times. Oh, thank you so much, Maggie. Appreciate it. And thank you, Maisie. Yes, my Thran Daddy t-shirt. I'm wearing this for Tipsy Tolkien today, which is what I'm going to film with Dawn after we finish. Let's see, how much more do we have here? Okay, if I keep a steady pace, we will probably finish in time, and then I need to start drinking. I have purpose today. But when Hurin was gone from Menegroth, Thingol sat long in silence, gazing upon the great treasures that lay upon his knees. And it came into his mind that it should be remade, and in it should be set the Silmaril. For as the years passed, Thingol's thought turned unceasingly to the Jewel of Feanor, and became bound to it, and he liked not to let it rest even behind the doors of his inmost treasury, and he was minded now to bear it with him always, waking and sleeping. In those days the dwarves still came on their journeys into Valerian from the mansions of Ered Lindon. Those are the Blue Mountains. And passing over Gallion at Sarn Athrad, the Ford of Stones, they travelled the ancient road to Doriath, for their skill in the working of metal and stone was very great, and there was much need of their craft in the halls of Menegroth. But they came now no longer in small parties as aforetime, but in great companies, well armed for their protection in the perilous lands between Aros and Gallion. Those are 2 river names. And they dwelt in Menegroth at such times in chambers and smithies set apart for them. At that very time, great craftsmen of Nogrod were lately come into Doriath, and the king, therefore, summoning them, declared his desire that if their skill were great enough, they should remake the Nauglamir, and in it set the Silmaril. Then the dwarves looked upon the work of their fathers, and they beheld with wonder the shining jewel of Feanor, and they were filled with a great lust to possess them, and carry them off to their far homes in the mountains. But they dissembled their mind, and consented to the task. Long was their labor, and Thingol went down alone to their deep smithies, and sat ever among them as they worked. In time, his desire was achieved, And the greatest of the works of elves and dwarves were brought together and made one. And its beauty was very great. For now the countless jewels of the Nauglamir did reflect and cast abroad in marvelous hues the light of the Silmaril amidmost. Then Thingol, being alone among them, made to take it up and clasp it around his neck. But the dwarves in that moment withheld it from him and demanded that he yield it up to them, saying, just read it. By what right does the Elven King lay claim to the Nauglamir that was made by our fathers for Finrod Felagund, who is dead? It has come to him but by the hand of Hurin, the man from Dorlomin, who took it as a thief out of the darkness of Nargothrond. But Thingol perceived their hearts, and saw well that, desiring the Silmaril, they sought but a pretext and fair cloak for their true intent. And in his wrath and pride he gave no heed to his peril, but spoke to them in scorn, saying,
How do ye of uncouth race dare to demand aught of me, Elu Thingol, lord of Beleriand, whose life began by the waters of Cuiviénen years uncounted, ere the fathers of the stunted people awoke?
And standing tall and proud among them, he bade them with shameful words be gone unrequited out of Doriath. Then the lust of the dwarves was kindled to rage by the words of the king, and they rose up about him, and laid hands on him, and slew him as he stood. So died in the deep places of Menegroth Elwë Singolo, king of Doriath, who alone of the children of Ilúvatar was joined with one of the Ainur, and he who, alone of the forsaken elves, had seen the light of the trees of Valinor, with his last sight gazed upon the Silmaril. Then the dwarves, taking the Nauglamir, passed out of Menegroth and fled eastwards through Region. But tidings went swiftly through the forest, and few of that company came over Aros, for they were pursued to the death as they sought the eastward road. And the Nauglamir was retaken, and brought back in bitter grief to Melian, the queen. Yet two there were of the slayers of Thingol who escaped from the pursuit on the eastern marches, and returned at last to their city far off in the Blue Mountains. And there in Nogrod they told somewhat of all that had befallen, saying that the dwarves were slain in Doriath by command of the Elven King, who thus would cheat them of their reward. So, that's not exactly the truth. Then great was the wrath and lamentation of the dwarves of Nogrod for the death of their kin and their great craftsmen, and they tore their beards and wailed. And long they sat taking thought for vengeance. It is told that they asked aid from Belagost, but it was denied them, and the dwarves of Belagost sought to dissuade them from their purpose. But their counsel was unavailing, and ere long a great host came forth from Nogrod, and crossing over Gallion, marched westward through Beleriand. So, Thingol's kind of a jerk. I mean, to be fair, his mind is sort of warped by the Silmaril at this point, because the Silmarils have the spirit of Feanor in them, and we have all seen how the spirit of Feanor operates. He's kind of an a-hole, to put it mildly. Feanor's not exactly the nicest guy, and seeing as the Silmarils were made from his spirit, they awake reckless passion in those who possess them. So Morgoth is guilty of this too. They draw out sort of the most negative passions in the people who bear the Silmarils. So we end up seeing that with pretty much everyone who holds one, except for Beren. Because Beren didn't want the Silmaril for himself. He didn't want to possess it. He only wanted to get it from Morgoth so that he could marry Luthien. And so once he achieved that, once he gave the Silmaril to Thingol, he's like, well, I'm done with it. I got the real prize. The real prize is your daughter here, which is a terrible thing to say. Because she's a woman. She's not a possession. But, you know, Luthien wanted to marry him too, so they get married, and Beren is content with that. He doesn't care about the Silmaril, but he's like the only one who doesn't care. So Thingol has it, you know, put into the Nauglamir, and can you even imagine how gorgeous this necklace is? Like, and it's not just like a necklace, it's like an entire chest piece. Envision the chest pieces of Egypt. Of like ancient Egypt, those gorgeous, like from the top of the neck downward, just cascading over the entire chest. Thingol is a really tall, really broad elf, and this necklace would have just sparkled on the guy. But of course, he never gets to put it on because once the Silmaril is in it, the dwarves withhold it. And then this whole bandying of, you know, ill-thought words happens. And you know, Thingol gets slain in his own kingdom, the dwarves run off, they give a not-so-accurate retelling of what happened, obviously to their own benefit. The dwarves and Belagust are like, bros, like, you don't want to start a war with the elves. Like, are we really talking about you starting a war with the elves? To which the dwarves of Novgorod are like, fuck yeah, we are. They called us inferior. The king called us inferior and then had us slain as we were running away. Leave out the part that they, you know, took something that wasn't necessarily theirs. So the Silmaril is at work, causing a bunch of trouble again. Go figure. But the Nauglamir is now back in the hands of the elves. It's in Doriath again. But the king is dead, so Melian is the queen, and remember, she is a Maya, so she's not an elf. And let us continue. Upon Doriath a heavy change had fallen. Melian sat long in silence beside Thingol the king, and her thought passed back into the starlit years and to their first meeting among the nightingales of Nan Elmoth in ages past, and she knew that her parting from Thingol was the forerunner of a greater parting, and that the doom of Doriath was drawing nigh. For Melian was of the divine race of the Valar, and she was a Maya of great power and wisdom. But for love of Elwë Singolo, she took upon herself the form of the elder children of Ilúvatar, and in that union she became bound by the chain and trammels of the flesh of Arda. In that form she bore to him Luthien to Nuviel, and in that form she gained power over the substance of Arda, and by the girdle of Melian was Doriath defended through long ages from the evils without. But now Thingol lay dead, and his spirit had passed to the halls of Mandos, and with his death a change came also upon Melian. Thus it came to pass that her power was withdrawn in that time from the forests of Neldoreth and Region, and Isgalduin, the enchanted river, spoke with a different voice, and Doriath lay open to its enemies. Basically, because she tied herself so closely to the form that she took, the elvish form that she took, her power has diminished. She's tied herself to the earth and given herself not a mortal form, but much like when Gandalf takes his physical form as the old wizard that we see in the trilogy movies. He takes that form on purpose, but he ties himself to it, which means that his body can be killed. Same thing goes with Melian here. It wouldn't destroy her, just like the fight with the Balrog did not destroy Gandalf. These are Maiar. But being so closely tied to that physical, earthbound form, means that their power isn't quite what it would be if they were in their true forms, which are beings of thought. So we don't have a clear vision of what they would actually look like, because they didn't necessarily have human form, or humanoid form. So, being so tied to her body where she could actually birth a child, her power is diminished in her grief. So Doriath is now open to its enemies. This is not good. Thereafter Melian spoke to none save to Mablung only, bidding him take heed to the Silmaril, and to send word speedily to Beren and Luthien in Osiriand. And she vanished out of Middle-earth, and passed to the land of the Valar beyond the western sea, to muse upon her sorrows in the gardens of Lorien, whence she came. And this tale speaks of her no more. So, she relinquishes her body in her own way, and as a spirit, as a Maya, travels back to Valinor. So she basically, the moment Thingol is dead, she forsakes the entire realm. Which, you know, it's her choice. But in that way, she gets to visit Thingol in the Halls of Mandos if she wants to. But she wants to handle her own grief in Lorien, which is a place of dreams and rest and repose. So she goes there. And Mablung is given orders to basically take the Silmaril down to Beren and Luthien, who are currently living in Osiriand, which is the land of seven rivers, south of where Nogrod and Belagost are in Eredluin, the Blue Mountains. Pardon me. Thus it was that the host of the Naugrim, dwarves, crossing over Aros, passed unhindered into the woods of Doriath, and none withstood them, for they were many and fierce, and the captains of the Grey Elves were cast into doubt and despair, and went hither and thither purposeless. I mean, they don't have a king to command them. But the dwarves held on their way, and passed over the great bridge, and entered into Menegroth. And there befell a thing most grievous among the sorrowful deeds of the elder days. For there was a battle in the 1,000 caves, and many elves and dwarves were slain, and it has not been forgotten. But the dwarves were victorious, and the halls of Thingol were ransacked and plundered. There fell Mablung of the Heavy Hand, before the doors of the treasury wherein lay the Nauglamir, and the Silmaril was taken. So the dwarves now have the Silmaril. It changes hands an awful lot here. At that time, Beren and Luthien yet dwelt in Tol Galen. This is an island in the middle of Osiriand. Dwelt in Tol Galen, the Green Isle, in the river Adurant, southernmost of the streams that, falling from Eredlindon, flowed down to join with Gallion. And their son, Dior Elohil, had to wife Nimloth, kinswoman of Celeborn, prince of Doriath, who was wedded to the lady Galadriel. Yeah, sorry. my brain was just making mental note of the family trees there. You end up doing that an awful lot with the Silmarillion. So Celeborn, who we know is married to Galadriel, we see him in the trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. His kinswoman, so someone from his family. Though it doesn't say whether she's like sister or cousin, but they're related. She's related to him. Her name is Nimloth, which means white flower. And she weds Dior, who is the son of Beren and Luthien. So Dior is half-elven, kind of, with a little hint of Maya in there. He's like a quarter Mayan. Because, remember, Melian is a Maya, so this line is not truly half-elven. Not like half-elf, half-human, the way that we normally think of them. The only elf to actually be 50% elven and human is Earendil. We'll get to him later. So Dior marries Nimloth. Nimloth is 100% elven. So we've got mostly elven, little bit of mortal in there, like good chunk of mortal in there, and then a sliver of Maya in there. Okay, so he had to wife Nimloth, kinswoman of Celeborn, prince of Doriath, who was wedded to Lady Galadriel. The sons of Dior and Nimloth were Elured and Elurin, and a daughter also was born to them, and she was named Elwing, which is star spray, for she was born on a night of stars, whose light glittered in the spray of the waterfall of Lanthir Lamath, beside her father's house. Now word went swiftly among the elves of Assyriand that a great host of dwarves bearing gear of war had come down out of the mountains and passed over Gelion at the Ford of Stones. These tidings came soon to Beren and Luthien, and in that time also a messenger came to them out of Doriath, telling of what had befallen there. Then Beren arose and left Tol Galen, and summoning to him Dior his son, they went north to the river Asgar, and with them went many of the green elves of Assyriand. Thus it came to pass that when the dwarves of Nogrod, returning from Menegroth with diminished host, came again to Sarn Athrad, they were assailed by unseen enemies. For as they climbed up Gelion's banks, burdened with the spoils of Doriath, suddenly all the woods were filled with the sound of elven horns, and shafts sped upon them from every side. There many of the dwarves were slain in the first onset, but some, escaping from the ambush, held together and fled eastward toward the mountains. And as they climbed the long slopes beneath Mount Dolmud, there came forth the shepherds of the trees, and they drove the dwarves into the shadowy woods of Ered Lindon, whence it is said came never one to climb the high passes that led to their homes. So, this is a moment for the Ents. We finally get to see the Ents taking their revenge on the dwarves, because if you remember all the way back at the beginning, when the dwarves first appear in this story made by Aule, not Elwë, when they are made by Aule, the inventor god, his wife, Yavanna, is pissed, because Aule made the dwarves when he wasn't supposed to, and when he was confronted by Eru, the one god, about his creation, Eru, he was ready to, strike them down. He was really crying about it. I just wanted to give people knowledge. I just wanted to create beings that I could teach. I just wanted a race that adored me. I hate Aule. But that was his thought process. And God lets him get away with it. Eru is just like, okay, you don't have to destroy them, but put them to sleep. They can't be the firstborn. I'm making the firstborn. The firstborn children of Iluvatar won't be the firstborn if the dwarves already exist, so let the firstborn be born first, as intended, and then your dwarves can exist. So Yavanna, Aule's wife, is just like, but you just let him do this? What gives, Eru? That ain't fair. He gets to make his own race when he wasn't supposed to. What about me? And so she makes the Ents, the shepherds of the forest. She makes the Ents out of spite. And she's like, the Ents are gonna hate your dwarves. I'm just saying. To which Aule replies, well, the dwarves are gonna need wood for their forge fires, so guess what? Don't care. So this is a lover squabble here. This is bickering married couple vibes. And the Ents are finally giving it to the dwarves. And you can just envision Yavanna back in Valinor going, heh. Meh. Take that. To which Aule will probably roll his eyes and be like, yeah, well, I've got a lot more dwarves where those came from, so whatever. Take a point off the board, give it to the Ents. But we finally get to see the Ents, which is kind of cool. So none of the dwarves make it back. None of them make it back to Nogrod. In that battle by Sarn Athrad, Beren fought his last fight, and he himself slew the Lord of Nogrod, and wrested from him the necklace of the dwarves. But he, dying, laid his curse upon all the treasure. Then Beren gazed in wonder on the self-same jewel of Feanor that he had cut from Morgoth's iron crown, now shining set amid gold and gems by the cunning of the dwarves. And he washed it clean of blood in the waters of the river. And when all was finished, the treasure of Doriath was drowned in the river Ascar. And from that time the river was named anew Rathoriel, the golden bed. But Beren took the Nauglamir and returned to Tol Galen. Little did it ease the grief of Luthien to learn that the Lord of Nogrod was slain and many dwarves beside, but it is said and sung that Luthien, wearing that necklace and that immortal jewel, was the vision of greatest beauty and glory that has ever been outside the realm of Valinor. And for a little while the land of the dead that live became like a vision of the land of the Valar. And no place has been since so fair, so fruitful, or so filled with light. Now Dior, Thingol's heir, bade farewell to Luthien and Beren, and departing from Lanthir Lamath with Nimloth his wife, he came to Menegroth and abode there. And with them went their young sons Elured and Elurin, and Elwing their daughter. Then the Sindar received them with joy, and they arose from the darkness of their grief for fallen kin and king, and for the departure of Melian. And Dior Eruhil set himself to raise anew the glory of the kingdom of Doriath. So Dior, just to give context, Dior is Thingol's grandson. Because Thingol's daughter was Luthien, she marries Beren, a mortal man, and this is their son. So Dior is the heir of Doriath. So he, with his wife and children, go back to Doriath and try to re-establish the realm. There came a night of autumn, and when it grew late, one came and smote upon the doors of Menegroth, demanding admittance to the king. He was a lord of the Green Elves hastening from Osiriand, and the door wards brought him to where Dior sat alone in his chamber, and there in silence he gave to the king a coffer, and took his leave. But in that coffer lay the necklace of the dwarves, wherein was set the Silmaril, and Dior looked upon it and knew it for a sign that Beren Erchamion and Luthien Tenuviel had died indeed, and gone where go the race of men to a fate beyond the world. Remember, Beren was mortally wounded in that fight with the dwarves, so he dies, and when he dies, Luthien goes with him. Their lives are tied together, as per the tale of Beren and Luthien earlier in the book. So when one goes, the other goes with him. So this is a sign. Dior knows that his parents are now dead. Long did Dior gaze upon the Silmaril, which his father and mother had brought beyond hope out of the terror of Morgoth, and his grief was great that death had come upon them so soon. But the wise have said that the Silmaril hastened their end, for the flame of the beauty of Luthien, as she wore it, was too bright for mortal lands. Then Dior arose, and about his neck he clasped the Nauglamir. And now he appeared as the fairest of all the children of the world, of threefold race, of the Edain, and of the Eldar, and of the Maiar of the Blessed Realm. All right, we're getting there. She can't die, but she can physically suffer. Yeah, talking about Luthien. Not Luthien, Melian. And hi, Birdman, welcome. Welcome over on Twitch. If you want to do me a favor, give me minutes watched, switch over to YouTube. Same handle, same exact handle. Find me over on YouTube, though, if you can. It really, really helps me. Okay. So just a little bit more, we're almost there. But now the rumor ran among the scattered elves of Valerian that Dior, Thingol's heir, wore the Nauglamir. And they said,
A Silmaril of Feanor burns again in the woods of Doriath.
And the oath of the sons of Feanor was waked again from sleep. For while Luthien wore the necklace of the dwarves, no elf would dare to assail her. But now, hearing of the renewal of Doriath and of Dior's pride, the seven gathered again from wandering, and they sent to him a claim, to claim their own. But Dior returned no answer to the sons of Feanor, and Celegorm stirred up his brothers to prepare an assault upon Doriath. They came at unawares in the middle of winter, and fought with Dior in the Thousand Caves, and so befell the second kinslaying of elf by elf. There fell Celegorm by Dior's hand, and there fell Culhwch and dark Caranthir. 3 sons of Feanor died. But Dior was slain also, and Nimloth his wife, and the cruel servants of Celegorm seized his young sons and left them to starve in the forest. Of this Maedhros indeed repented, and sought for them long in the woods of Doriath, but his search was unavailing. And of the fate of Elured and Elurin no tale tells. Thus Doriath was destroyed and never rose again, but the sons of Feanor gained not what they sought, for the remnant of the people fled before them, and with them was Elwing, Dior's daughter. And they escaped, and bearing with them the Silmaril, they came in time to the mouths of the river Sirion by the sea. And that's the end of chapter 22. So Doriath has a really bad time of it. And this is how we say that that Húrin, in his own way, caused the fall of Doriath. But he didn't himself cause it. It's just that his fate brought the Nauglamir back to Thingol, and Thingol had it set with the Silmaril, and that just triggers all of the events. Thingol is a jerk, and he says the wrong things to the dwarves. The dwarves end up killing him. There's a big battle in Doriath. Lots of elves and dwarves get slain in the Thousand Caves of Menegroth. And you end up just with this huge struggle. Eventually, the Silmaril goes down into Osiriand. Beren and Luthien have it for a while. Luthien wears it. She's frickin' gorgeous. No one dares to assail her when she has it. But the moment that she and Beren pass away, and the Silmaril is given to their son Dior, who is now back in Doriath, the sons of Feanor are like, well, Luthien we didn't want to mess with, because Celegorm and Culhwch are probably still very sore about how they were utterly defeated by Luthien because their own hound betrayed them. Their own hound was just like, bros, seriously, like you shouldn't be doing this to Luthien. Luthien is amazing, and I don't like you. So Huan, the Hound of Valinor, turned on Celegorm and Culhwch. So they're probably pretty sore about the whole thing, and they're like, if we could take the Silmaril from her son, hell yeah. Let's do it. Let's kill this guy. Celegorm kills the son of Luthien himself. That's, like... that takes balls. But Celegorm and Culhwch and Caranthir, all of the middle children of Feanor, the 3 middle kids, all perish in the second kinslaying. You're the only one there. That's okay. Hi. Everyone's over on my YouTube instead. So link in bio if you want to see illustrations and such. Though we're just about to finish up. My birthday was great. Thank you. Kept it pretty simple. I ate a churro dog, which is basically just a hot dog with the bun as a churro. They make those here. There's a churro place locally that makes churro dogs, and I was like, that is bonkers, and I must try one. So I went with my sister, and we tried one. It was okay. I wouldn't have it again. It's like a corn dog. Oh, you tried one once? Yeah, it's alright. I don't tend to put any condiments on my hot dogs. I'm weird. I like to be able to taste the bun and the meat, and that's all I really care about. So I'm not one to get what's called a Sonoran dog, which apparently are like really loaded with stuff. I've only vaguely heard of those. I think it's an Arizona thing. The Sonoran Desert is here, so I assume. Yeah, it's alright. But I did that and I chilled out. Late yesterday, I finally finished putting up the decals of the 2 trees in my house. So stay tuned on TikTok for videos of that. If you want pictures immediately, I will be posting those up on my Patreon before I do any videos or anything over on TikTok. So if you guys want to see the progress of the 2 trees in the #Valinor house, I'm really having fun with it. I finally got at least the trees, the actual like trunks and branches. All of the trees, the 2 trees, are on the wall. Now I need to paint all of the individual leaves and then apply all of the individual leaves, and there are hundreds of them. So I have gold and silver paint that I am painting onto the leaf decals. Because if you remember, at the beginning of the Silmarillion, when we talk about the 2 trees, Telperion, which is the elder of the 2 trees, the silver tree, has dark green leaves whose undersides are silver. This is specifically described by Tolkien. And then Laurelin, the golden tree, has like brighter green leaves that are ringed with gold. And so I'm using metallic paints to paint the decals like that. So there will be gold, edges on the leaves for Laurelin, and they'll be half silver for the leaves of Telperion. So I'm putting in the effort, okay? Like this is gonna take a lot of painting and patience. But I do have the 2 trees up, and now I need to start working on the leaves. So that's the next project. Updates for it will all be on my Patreon. And in case you're over on YouTube, I do have a link up here, thronegifts.com/u/wizardwaykris. That is my gift list. So if you would like to buy me something for Valinor House, I do have a gift list set up. Some stuff is super cheap, like $5. Other stuff, a lot more expensive. But it really ranges. If you ever want to provide me something for Valinor House, I do have a subsect on my gift list that is just #Valinor House. So you can help me do that. Eventually I will buy the things, but if you'd like to gift me something, you can. It is not required at all. But I appreciate it if you send me something. Oh, nice. You're going to be painting them eventually? Yeah. I am excited about Valinor House stuff. I am making progress. But I need to call it quits because I need to get some food in me so that I don't get completely out of it drunk just by having a couple drinks. I am a huge lightweight, so it won't take much. But I made what I like to call hula punch. It's basically fruit punch, but it's vodka based, so there's gonna be a lot of alcohol in that. I'm gonna put it over ice and just hope for the best. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. If you want to see me tipsy and talking about Tolkien, join Dawn's Patreon. This is an extra feature for people who join Don's Patreon, so I don't typically drink. This is going to be kind of a special thing for me, but I'm going to join Don shortly, and we're going to record that, so stay tuned. I'll poke him and see if I can share it with my patrons too. Though I think most of my patrons are also his patrons, so we'll see. But that's going to be it for me today, guys. I really appreciate you guys hanging out and getting one more chapter down with me. So that is the Fall of Doriath, and that takes us to the second kinslaying. 3 of the 7 sons of Feanor are now dead. So the remaining sons of Feanor are Maedhros, the eldest, Maglor, the bard, the warrior bard. So those are the 2 eldest children of Feanor, and then Amrod and Amras. At least in this version, they're both alive. So we still have 4 sons of Feanor left, but that's not going to last long either. So stay tuned next week where we will follow the Fall of Gondolin, which is pretty epic, and there are a lot of names and stuff that we will enjoy. The structure of Gondolin is actually pretty complex. I don't remember how much they go into here versus all of the extra information that is in the Book of Lost Tales and the Fall of Gondolin standalone book. The Fall of Gondolin is pretty epic, so we're going to cover that next week. And if time permits, we'll cover the Fall of Gondolin and then the Voyage of Eärendil, which will close out the entirety of the Quintus Silmarillion. So, we'll see how far we get, but that will be next week. So join me again for Silmarillion Saturday. I will also be trying to do an extra live stream. I want to try out a bunch of ASMR stuff, so I will be trying to do another live stream sometime next week. I'm thinking probably like Tuesday, maybe Wednesday. Wednesday? Probably Wednesday. I think we'll aim for Wednesday. But that will be primarily ASMR, so if you like all of the tingly stuff, if you like to relax before heading to bed, it will be a nighttime live stream, and you can just join me for some relaxing vibes, probably some singing. I have a new microphone. You guys want to see my microphone? I have a head rec microphone now. This is what's called a binaural mic. So I can speak into the different ears, and if you're wearing headphones, you get it in each ear. It's very, very immersive. Super relaxing to listen to. So if that's the sort of thing that you would enjoy, please head over to my YouTube channel and subscribe. You'll then be notified. If you turn the notification bell on, you'll be notified when I go live, and hopefully you'll enjoy some ASMR stuff. So that is the goal for this week. And I'm going to start painting those leaves so I can continue getting the 2 trees of Valinor up in my living room. For updates on that, definitely join my Patreon, patreon.com/wizardwaykris. Love you guys. I will see you guys next week. Take care, and bye, guys. Bye!